I was barely conscious from the epidural when my phone buzzed with a call from Emma, the director of Desert Hope Community Shelter. Through my labor haze, her voice cut through like ice water. "Sarah, I'm so sorry to bother you, but we just received a massive donation of household items from someone claiming to be cleaning out their son's rental property. The donation slip has your name on some of these items, and I wanted to verify before we process everything." My heart stopped. I was literally in active labor, my daughter Lily fighting to enter this world, and my mother-in-law Patricia had just donated my entire life to charity. Every wedding gift, every piece of furniture I'd saved for, every memento from my late grandmother, gone. But that phone call would become the catalyst for the most satisfying revenge I've ever orchestrated. One that would expose my in-laws for the manipulative thieves they truly were. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Sarah, 28 years old, and I should have seen this coming from the moment Jake slipped that engagement ring on my finger 3 years ago. My husband came from what Phoenix locals called old money. His family owned Henderson Family Plumbing and HVAC, a business that had been passed down through 4 generations and practically built half of Scottsdale. When Jake first introduced me to his parents, Patricia and Robert Henderson, at Copper Canyon Steakhouse, I thought their cool reception was just typical protective parent behavior. Patricia sat ramrod straight in her designer blazer, picking at her salmon while asking pointed questions about my little flower shop. Robert barely acknowledged my presence, spending most of dinner discussing business expansion with Jake as if I were invisible furniture. But Jake squeezed my hand under the table and whispered reassurances, promising things would improve once they got to know me better. How wrong I was. The real Patricia emerged during our wedding planning, when she insisted on changing every detail I'd chosen for our ceremony at Sunrise Resort. My carefully selected desert wildflower arrangements? Too rustic. My grandmother's vintage lace veil? Outdated and embarrassing. My modest guest list of close friends and family? Insufficient for their social standing. Jake, ever the peacekeeper, convinced me to compromise on everything, assuring me that starting married life with family harmony was worth more than perfect wedding flowers. I owned Bloom and Petal Florist Shop, and flowers were literally my expertise, yet I found myself nodding along as Patricia replaced my artistic vision with generic white roses and baby's breath that cost 3 times more and had 0 personality. The pattern continued after our wedding when we moved into what I thought was our starter home, a charming adobe-style house in a quiet Scottsdale neighborhood that Jake had found for us. The rent seemed surprisingly reasonable for the area, and Jake explained that he'd negotiated a great deal through a family connection. What he failed to mention until months later was that his parents owned the property outright, making us tenants rather than independent newlyweds. This arrangement gave Patricia a convenient excuse to drop by unannounced whenever she pleased, always finding something to criticize about my housekeeping, decorating choices, or meal planning. She'd run her finger along surfaces checking for dust, rearrange my carefully curated succulent displays, and make passive-aggressive comments about the interesting way I organized the kitchen cabinets. Jake's sisters, Ashley and Melissa, formed a unified front of condescension that made family gatherings feel like endurance tests. Ashley, married to Brian, who worked as the company's operations manager, had perfected the art of backhanded compliments. She'd admire my homemade enchiladas while mentioning how she'd learned to make them the authentic way from their family's longtime housekeeper, implying my cooking was somehow inferior. Melissa, whose husband Kevin handled the business finances, preferred direct attacks disguised as helpful suggestions. She'd recommend better neighborhoods where successful couples lived, question whether my flower shop was truly profitable, and suggest I might be happier working for someone else rather than struggling with entrepreneurship. The family business became another weapon in their arsenal of subtle torture. Every Sunday dinner at Patricia and Robert's sprawling desert estate included lengthy discussions about company profits, expansion opportunities, and employee management strategies. Conversations that pointedly excluded me despite my background in small business ownership. When I attempted to contribute insights from running my own shop, Patricia would smile tightly and redirect the conversation back to real business matters, as if arranging corporate events and managing wedding contracts somehow didn't qualify as legitimate commercial experience. Jake would shoot me apologetic glances but never intervened, always choosing family peace over defending his wife. The isolation intensified when I became pregnant with Lily. Patricia immediately appointed herself as pregnancy expert, dismissing my carefully researched birth plan and recommending her preferred obstetrician without consulting me. She accompanied us to doctor's appointments where she'd pepper Dr. Martinez with questions about my health, as if I weren't sitting right there capable of speaking for myself. When I expressed interest in natural childbirth methods, Patricia laughed dismissively and shared horror stories about women who'd tried to be heroes during delivery, insisting that modern medicine existed for good reasons and I shouldn't let pride endanger her grandchild. Ashley and Melissa used my pregnancy as ammunition for increased criticism, questioning every choice from my prenatal vitamin brand to my decision to continue working through my second trimester. They'd share unsolicited advice about proper pregnancy nutrition while watching me eat lunch, comment on my growing belly with fake concern about excessive weight gain, and make jokes about hormonal mood swings whenever I showed any signs of frustration with their behavior. Their husbands, Brian and Kevin, treated my pregnancy like an inconvenience that might interfere with family business operations, suggesting I should consider stepping back from my flower shop to focus on preparing for motherhood. As my due date approached, the family's behavior reached new levels of presumption and control that should have served as warning signs for what was coming. The warning signs were everywhere, but love makes you blind to red flags that should have sent me running toward the Arizona state line. When Jake first brought me home to meet the Henderson clan during my second month of pregnancy, I was still naive enough to believe that becoming a grandmother would soften Patricia's edges. Instead, she used my condition as leverage to insert herself deeper into every aspect of our lives, transforming from occasional critic to full-time puppet master. It started with small invasions disguised as helpfulness. Patricia began showing up at my flower shop during busy periods, claiming she wanted to learn about my little hobby, while actually inspecting my business practices like a health department official. She'd walk through bloom and petal, with her designer handbag clutched tight, commenting on everything from my inventory organization to my customer service approach. "Sweetie, you might want to consider upgrading your point-of-sale system," she'd suggest, while watching me ring up a wedding consultation. The Henderson businesses use professional software that tracks everything automatically. This little calculator method seems so exhausting for someone in your condition. My condition became her favorite weapon. Every conversation somehow circled back to my pregnancy and how it was affecting my ability to function normally. When I mentioned feeling tired after a particularly busy Saturday designing arrangements for 3 different events, Patricia would launch into lectures about the dangers of overexertion during the second trimester. "You know, Sarah, most successful businesswomen step back during pregnancy to focus on what really matters," she'd say with that saccharine smile that never reached her eyes. "The baby's health should be your priority now, not chasing after every small contract that comes through that shop." Robert, meanwhile, perfected the art of financial intimidation disguised as paternal concern. He'd corner me during family barbecues at their massive backyard pool area, asking probing questions about my shop's profit margins and cash flow projections. Running a small business during pregnancy must be incredibly stressful, he'd muse while nursing his 3rd bourbon of the evening. You've got medical expenses coming up, nursery costs, and then there's the reality that new mothers often can't maintain the same work schedule. Have you considered what happens to the shop if you need extended recovery time? These conversations always included subtle suggestions about Jake taking over my business operations or, better yet, selling the shop entirely to focus on being a proper Henderson wife and mother. Robert would paint scenarios where I'd be overwhelmed by motherhood and unable to maintain professional responsibilities, conveniently forgetting that I'd built Bloom and Petal from nothing into Phoenix's most requested wedding florist over 4 years of relentless dedication and creative vision. Ashley escalated the psychological warfare by appointing herself as my pregnancy mentor. Despite having given birth to her twins 6 years earlier under completely different circumstances, she'd call me daily with updates on what I should be eating, exercising, and thinking about at my specific stage of pregnancy. When I was 28 weeks, I was already having weekly pedicures to prepare for swollen feet, she'd informed me during one particularly intrusive phone call, and I'd stopped lifting anything heavier than a coffee cup. Brian insisted I hire help for everything. Are you still moving those heavy flower arrangements around? That seems dangerous. Her advice always came with implicit criticism of Jake's failure to properly pamper and protect me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. According to Ashley, a devoted husband would have already hired household staff, upgraded our living situation, and insisted I stop working entirely. Brian wouldn't let me lift a finger during my pregnancy, she'd boast during family dinners. He said his job was to make sure I could focus completely on growing healthy babies. Jake, you should really consider what's best for Sarah and the baby here. Melissa took a different approach, focusing on our financial preparedness and living arrangements with laser precision that felt more like an audit than family concern. She'd arrive at our house unannounced, ostensibly to drop off hand-me-down baby items from her daughter's outgrown collection, but really to catalog our possessions and evaluate our readiness for parenthood. This nursery is so tiny, she'd observe while standing in the room Jake and I had carefully painted and decorated. When Kevin and I were expecting Madison, we realized immediately that our starter home wasn't suitable for raising children properly. We upgraded to something more appropriate before the baby arrived. Her visits became increasingly frequent and invasive as my due date approached. She'd inspect our refrigerator contents, comment on our furniture quality, and make pointed observations about our lack of baby-proofing measures. You know, Sarah, babies outgrow cribs faster than you'd think, she'd mention while examining the beautiful handcrafted crib my parents had driven from New Mexico to deliver. We went through 3 different setups before Madison was walking. It's expensive when you don't plan ahead for growth. The family business discussions during Sunday dinners evolved into strategy sessions about my future role in the Henderson dynasty, conversations that assumed I'd gladly abandon my entrepreneurial independence to become a supporting player in their established hierarchy. Patricia would sketch out scenarios where I'd transition from flower shop owner to Henderson family matriarch in training, learning the proper ways to host business dinners, support Jake's career advancement, and raise children who'd eventually inherit their piece of the plumbing empire. Once the baby arrives, you'll see how different your priorities become, Patricia would explain, while serving her famous tres leches cake that I'd learned to choke down politely. A mother's job is to create stability and support for her family. Jake's got tremendous potential in the business, but he needs a wife who understands how to be a proper partner. Running around with flowers and wedding planning won't seem important anymore when you're holding your daughter. These family meetings increasingly felt like board meetings where my life was being restructured without my consent or input. Robert would discuss Jake's expanding responsibilities within Henderson Family Plumbing, mentioning new accounts and management opportunities that would require more travel and longer hours. Ashley and Melissa would share insights about balancing motherhood with supporting their husbands' careers, always emphasizing how they'd learned to prioritize family success over personal ambitions. Jake participated in these conversations with disturbing enthusiasm, nodding along as his family redesigned our future around their expectations and traditions. When I tried to express concerns about maintaining my business or preserving some independence after Lily's birth, he'd squeeze my hand and suggest we could discuss details later, privately. But those private conversations never materialized into concrete support for my goals, or pushback against his family's increasing demands on our autonomy. The control mechanisms became more sophisticated as my pregnancy progressed into the 3rd trimester. Patricia began scheduling my doctor's appointments through Jake, claiming she wanted to ensure I didn't miss important checkups due to work obligations. She'd call Dr. Martinez's office directly, identifying herself as concerned family and requesting appointment availabilities that aligned with her own schedule. When I discovered this arrangement, Jake defended it as helpful family support rather than boundary violation. My mom just wants to be involved in her first grandchild's development, he'd explain when I confronted him about Patricia's appointment coordination. She's excited and wants to help however she can. You've been so busy with the shop lately, and she was worried you might schedule conflicts during important weeks. This way, someone's keeping track of everything properly. The financial pressure intensified when Robert began questioning our insurance coverage and hospital preferences, suggesting that Henderson family connections could secure better care at more prestigious facilities. He'd research Phoenix's top-rated maternity wards and compare them to Dr. Martinez's hospital affiliation, implying that our choices reflected inadequate preparation for such an important event. "You get one chance to do this right," he'd remind us during increasingly frequent financial planning discussions. Cutting corners on medical care isn't worth the savings when you're talking about your child's health and Sarah's safety. These conversations always concluded with offers of Henderson family assistance, loans that wouldn't technically be loans, and connections that could upgrade our entire pregnancy experience if we just accept their guidance and support. The offers came with unspoken strings attached, creating obligations and debts that would tie us more permanently to their expectations and control systems. As my due date approached in late August, the family's involvement in our preparations reached suffocating levels that should have triggered every alarm bell in my pregnancy-addled brain, but I was too exhausted and overwhelmed to recognize the trap being constructed around my entire existence. The breaking point started building 3 weeks before my due date when Patricia announced she'd be staying with us for the final stretch of my pregnancy. She presented this invasion as a generous offer to help with household management while I focused on preparing for labor, but her true agenda became crystal clear within hours of her arrival at our Scottsdale rental. Jake had agreed to this arrangement without consulting me, presenting it as a done deal when he picked her up from the airport with 2 large suitcases that suggested a much longer stay than the casual weekend visit I'd been expecting. "Sarah, you look exhausted already and the baby isn't even here yet," Patricia declared while surveying our living room with the calculating eye of a general planning a military occupation. "Good thing I'm here to take charge before things get completely overwhelming. You pregnant women never realize how much help you actually need until it's too late." She'd brought her own bedding, bathroom supplies, and enough personal items to stock a small hotel, immediately transforming our guest room into her command center for the Henderson family operation she was about to launch. Jake disappeared into his home office for an urgent work call within minutes of her arrival, leaving me alone to navigate Patricia's immediate reorganization of our domestic systems. She started with the kitchen, opening every cabinet and drawer while muttering disapproving commentary about our food storage methods and meal planning strategies. "Honey, you can't be eating this processed garbage when you're this close to delivery," she announced while examining our pantry contents. "The baby needs proper nutrition right up until birth, and these convenience foods are full of chemicals that could affect labor progression." Her kitchen takeover escalated quickly from criticism to complete replacement of our grocery supplies. Patricia spent her first afternoon loading our refrigerator with organic vegetables, expensive cuts of meat, and specialty ingredients that reflected her idea of proper prenatal nutrition rather than foods I actually enjoyed eating. When I protested that some of her purchases conflicted with my dietary preferences and pregnancy cravings, she waved off my concerns with patronizing explanations about maternal sacrifice and fetal development priorities. "You'll thank me later when you have an easy delivery and a healthy baby," she insisted while tossing my favorite pregnancy snacks into a donation bag destined for disposal. "I've been through this before, sweetie, and I know what works. Your little cravings aren't as important as giving your daughter the best possible start in life. Sometimes being a good mother means making smart choices instead of indulgent ones." The territorial expansion continued into our bedroom, where Patricia appointed herself as monitor of my sleep schedule and daily activities. She'd wake me up at precisely 7 each morning with homemade breakfast and detailed schedules for the day's approved activities. These schedules included mandatory rest periods, supervised light exercise sessions, and educational segments where she'd lecture me about newborn care techniques that contradicted everything I'd learned in our birthing classes. "The classes you've been taking sound lovely, but they're mostly theoretical," Patricia would explain, while demonstrating her preferred swaddling method using a practice doll she'd brought from home. "Real experience teaches you what actually works with babies. You'll save yourself a lot of frustration if you learn the right techniques from the beginning instead of trying all these modern approaches that sound good but don't deliver results." Her presence turned every aspect of my daily routine into a performance evaluation, where I consistently failed to meet Henderson family standards for expectant motherhood. Patricia critiqued everything from my choice of maternity clothes to my method of organizing the nursery, always offering improvements that aligned with her vision of proper preparation, rather than my personal preferences or comfort levels. The power struggle intensified when Ashley and Melissa began making daily visits to support their mother's domestic intervention. They'd arrive each afternoon like a coordinated assault team, armed with additional supplies, unsolicited advice, and pointed observations about my inability to maintain household standards during late pregnancy. Their visits followed a predictable pattern of inspection, criticism, and reconstruction of whatever systems I'd attempted to establish in their absence. Ashley specialized in nursery management, constantly rearranging furniture and baby supplies according to efficiency principles she'd learned during her own motherhood experience. "Sarah, you've got the changing station positioned completely wrong for easy access during night feedings," she'd announce while moving furniture around without permission. "When you're sleep-deprived and dealing with a crying baby at 3 a.m, you'll need everything within arm's reach. This cute, decorative arrangement won't work when you're functioning on 2 hours of sleep." Melissa focused on financial preparation and household organization, questioning our readiness for the economic realities of parenthood, while suggesting expensive upgrades to our baby equipment and living arrangements. She'd examine price tags on our carefully chosen baby items, comparing them unfavorably to the premium brands she'd selected for her own children. "You know, investing in quality items from the beginning actually saves money long-term," she'd lecture while handling our budget-conscious purchases with obvious disappointment. "Cheap baby gear falls apart quickly, and then you end up buying replacements that cost more than getting good stuff initially." The daily invasions created a suffocating atmosphere where I felt like a guest in my own home, constantly monitored and corrected by women who'd appointed themselves as experts on my pregnancy, my preparation, and my worthiness as a future Henderson family member. Every conversation became a teaching moment where they'd share superior knowledge about childbirth, newborn care, and maternal responsibilities that I'd supposedly failed to understand despite months of research and preparation. Jake's absence during these educational sessions became increasingly convenient and suspicious. He'd schedule work meetings, business errands, and social obligations that kept him away from home during the peak hours of family intervention, leaving me to navigate their criticism and control tactics without support or backup. When I complained about feeling overwhelmed by his family's constant presence and opinions, he'd minimize my concerns as pregnancy hormones and stress, rather than legitimate boundary violations. "They're just excited about becoming aunts and a grandmother," he'd explain, when I tried to describe the suffocating atmosphere his family had created in our home. "I know they can be a little intense, but they mean well and they want to help. You're probably feeling extra sensitive right now because of the pregnancy hormones. Once the baby arrives and things settle down, you'll appreciate having experienced mothers around to guide you through the learning curve." The gaslighting became more sophisticated as Patricia settled into her role as household supervisor and pregnancy manager. She'd document my daily activities, food intake, and rest periods in a notebook that she'd review with Jake each evening, presenting her observations as medical monitoring rather than invasive surveillance. These reports always highlighted my failures to follow her prescribed routines and suggestions, creating a narrative where I appeared irresponsible and unprepared for motherhood without proper family guidance. "Sarah had trouble getting up for breakfast again this morning," she'd inform Jake while I sat right there, listening to her evaluation of my behavior. "And she only ate half of the protein I prepared for her. I'm concerned she's not taking the nutritional requirements seriously enough. The baby needs consistent maternal care, especially this close to delivery." Her reports became evidence in ongoing discussions about my capability to handle motherhood independently, conversations that suggested I'd need extended family support and supervision even after Lily's birth. Patricia would connect my pregnancy behavior to larger concerns about my maturity, preparation, and commitment to Henderson family values, building a case for increased involvement in our parenting decisions and household management. The psychological warfare escalated when she began making unilateral decisions about our birth plan and hospital arrangements, consulting with Jake privately about changes that contradicted my expressed preferences and medical discussions with Dr. Martinez. Patricia researched alternative pain management options, questioned my choice of pediatrician, and suggested modifications to our delivery room policies that would accommodate extended family presence during labor and recovery. "I think we should reconsider having Ashley and Melissa in the delivery room for support," she mentioned casually during dinner one evening. "They've both been through this experience, and they could provide valuable assistance if complications arise." Plus, it would be wonderful for the sisters to bond with their new niece from the very beginning. The suggestion terrified me. But Jake seemed intrigued by the idea of turning Lily's birth into a Henderson family celebration rather than an intimate experience between parents and their new daughter. When I objected to having his sisters present during such a vulnerable and personal moment, Patricia framed my resistance as selfishness and ingratitude toward family members who only wanted to share in our joy. Childbirth is a beautiful family experience, not something to hide from people who love you, she argued when I tried to maintain boundaries around our delivery room policies. Your daughter will benefit from being surrounded by love and support from the moment she enters the world. Keeping family away during such an important time seems unnecessarily exclusionary, and frankly, a little paranoid. The pressure mounted daily as Patricia enlisted Ashley and Melissa in campaigns to modify our birth plan, hospital policies, and postpartum arrangements according to Henderson family traditions and expectations, rather than my medical needs and personal preferences. The attack on my professional identity began during what Patricia called a family business meeting that she scheduled without my knowledge or consent. I came home from Bloom and Petal one Thursday afternoon to find Jake, his parents, Ashley, Melissa, Brian, and Kevin all gathered around our dining room table, with documents spread out like they were planning a corporate merger. The sight of my own financial records and business papers scattered across the surface made my pregnant belly clench with anxiety and fury. Sarah, perfect timing, Patricia announced, as if I'd been expected to participate in this invasion of my privacy. We've been discussing your flower shop situation and how to handle the transition once the baby arrives. Robert has some excellent suggestions about streamlining your operations to reduce stress during early motherhood. She gestured toward a stack of papers that I recognized as my business license, tax returns, and lease agreement for the shop space, documents that should have been locked in our home office filing cabinet. Jake avoided eye contact as I stared at him in disbelief. He'd clearly provided access to my private business information without discussing it with me first, enabling his family to analyze my financial situation and make decisions about my professional future behind my back. The betrayal cut deeper than any of Patricia's previous manipulations because it involved the one thing I'd built entirely on my own, without Henderson family money or connections. I didn't realize we were having a business meeting about my shop, I said carefully, trying to control the tremor in my voice while placing my hand protectively over my belly, especially one that apparently required access to my confidential financial records. The room fell silent as everyone exchanged glances that suggested they'd anticipated this reaction and prepared strategies to handle my objections. Robert cleared his throat and launched into a presentation about the realities of small business ownership during major life transitions. Using my own numbers to demonstrate why continuing to operate Bloom and Petal after Lily's birth would be financially irresponsible and physically impossible. He'd calculated my average monthly revenue, subtracted estimated childcare costs, and factored in reduced working hours to create projections that made my beloved business look like an expensive hobby rather than a viable career. The numbers don't lie, Sarah, he explained, while sliding a spreadsheet across the table that itemized every expense associated with my shop operations. Even if you maintain current revenue levels, which is unlikely with a newborn, you'll barely break even after accounting for childcare, reduced hours, and increased family expenses. It's simply not sustainable for a new mother to maintain this level of business commitment. Ashley jumped in with her own analysis of the physical demands that would make continued entrepreneurship impossible once I became responsible for an infant. She'd researched the time requirements for newborn care, calculated sleep deprivation effects on cognitive function, and created schedules that demonstrated the impossibility of managing both motherhood and business ownership simultaneously. Sarah, I remember those first few months with the twins, she said, with fake sympathy, while reviewing her printed timeline of newborn care requirements. You're awake every 2 hours for feeding, you're exhausted all the time, and your brain feels like mush from the hormones and sleep deprivation. There's no way you could handle client consultations, wedding planning, or inventory management when you can barely remember to eat meals regularly. Melissa contributed financial projections that compared my shop's modest profits to Jake's earning potential within Henderson Family Plumbing, demonstrating how much more prosperous our family could become if I focused on supporting his career advancement instead of maintaining my independent business operations. Her calculations included estimates for Jake's promotion timeline, salary increases, and potential ownership stakes in the family company, painting a picture of financial security that depended on my willingness to abandon my professional ambitions. "Look at these projections, Sarah," she said while highlighting numbers that showed Jake's potential income doubling within 5 years if he dedicated himself fully to expanding the Henderson business empire. Brian and Kevin have both benefited tremendously from focusing on company growth instead of splitting attention between multiple ventures. When wives support their husband's career development, the whole family prospers. Patricia orchestrated this financial intervention with the precision of a hostile corporate takeover, using my own business data to build a case for why I should voluntarily dissolve Bloom & Petal and transition into a supporting role within the Henderson family structure. She'd researched comparable flower shops that had failed after the owners became mothers, compiled statistics about small business failure rates during economic stress periods, and prepared alternative scenarios for my professional future that aligned with Henderson family values. "We're not saying you have to give up flowers entirely," Patricia explained, with the tone of someone offering a generous compromise rather than demanding complete capitulation. "There are wonderful opportunities to use your creative talents in ways that complement family life instead of competing with it. You could design arrangements for Henderson Company events, help with holiday decorating, or even teach occasional classes once the children are older." The transformation of my career from independent business ownership to occasional creative hobby felt like professional assassination disguised as helpful family planning. They'd reduced 4 years of entrepreneurial success, client relationships, and artistic development into a cute pastime that I could pursue when family obligations permitted, rather than a legitimate career that deserved protection and respect. Jake finally spoke up, but instead of defending my business or questioning his family's right to make decisions about my professional future, he reinforced their arguments with additional concerns about work-life balance and family priorities. He worried about me overexerting myself during early motherhood, questioned whether I could maintain quality standards while caring for a newborn, and suggested that stepping back from business ownership might actually be liberating rather than limiting. "Maybe this could be a blessing in disguise," he said, while reaching across the table to squeeze my hand in what was supposed to be a supportive gesture. "You've been working so hard for so long, and you deserve a break to focus on being a mom without the stress of running a business. We could always revisit entrepreneurship later when things settle down and we have a better handle on family life." The casual dismissal of my professional identity and achievements sparked a rage that burned through my pregnancy fatigue and emotional vulnerability. These people were sitting in my dining room, using my private financial information, making decisions about my career, and expecting gratitude for their interference in my autonomous adult life. They'd transformed a business consultation into an intervention designed to eliminate my independence and secure my compliance with their vision of proper Henderson family structure. "I appreciate everyone's concern," I said with as much dignity as I could muster while surrounded by people who'd invaded my privacy and attacked my livelihood. "But I didn't ask for business advice, and I certainly didn't authorize anyone to access my financial records or make plans for my professional future without my input." The room erupted in defensive explanations about family support, loving concern, and practical assistance during a challenging transition period. Patricia insisted they were only trying to help me avoid unnecessary stress during early motherhood. Robert emphasized the importance of making smart financial decisions based on objective data rather than emotional attachment to impractical ventures. Ashley and Melissa shared stories about their own career sacrifices that had ultimately benefited their families and marriages. But their justifications couldn't disguise the fundamental violation of my autonomy and respect that this intervention represented. They'd treated my business like a problem to be solved, rather than an achievement to be celebrated, my professional skills like obstacles to overcome rather than assets to be valued, and my decision-making capacity like a liability to be managed, rather than a right to be respected. The meeting concluded with an ultimatum disguised as a timeline for voluntary transition. Patricia suggested I should begin winding down shop operations within the next month, allowing time to transfer existing commitments to other florists and close out financial obligations before Lily's arrival. She'd even researched potential buyers for my equipment and client lists, presenting the dissolution of my business as an organized process rather than a devastating loss. We've found several established florists in Phoenix who might be interested in purchasing your client base and equipment, she announced while sliding business cards across the table like she was dealing poker hands. This way you could recoup some of your investment while ensuring your customers receive continued service. It's really the most responsible approach for everyone involved. As I sat there surrounded by people who claimed to love me while systematically dismantling everything I'd worked to build, I realized that this intervention was just the beginning of their campaign to transform me from an independent woman into a compliant Henderson family member, whose identity revolved entirely around supporting their dynasty rather than pursuing my own dreams and ambitions. The humiliation reached its peak during what should have been a joyful celebration of Lily's impending arrival. Patricia had organized a baby shower at the prestigious Sunrise Resort without consulting me about the guest list, theme, or any other details that typically involve the expecting mother's preferences and input. I discovered this event was happening when Ashley casually mentioned it during one of her daily inspection visits, assuming I already knew about the elaborate party being planned in my honor. "You'll love what Mom has arranged for Sunday," Ashley said while rearranging my nursery organization system for the third time that week. "She's invited everyone who matters in Phoenix society, and the resort is providing their premium brunch package. It's exactly the kind of sophisticated celebration that announces the Henderson family's newest addition properly." The casual way she discussed this major event made it clear that my role was to show up and be grateful, rather than participate in planning my own baby shower. When I expressed surprise that such an important event was being organized without my knowledge or involvement, Ashley looked genuinely confused by my reaction. According to Henderson family logic, pregnant women shouldn't be burdened with party planning stress, and experienced family members naturally took charge of social arrangements to ensure everything met appropriate standards. My desire to have input on my own celebration was treated as unreasonable and potentially harmful to my pregnancy health. "Sarah, you're 8 months pregnant and exhausted all the time," Ashley explained with the patience of someone addressing a particularly slow child. "Mom and I have planned dozens of successful parties over the years. We know exactly what works for these occasions, and we want everything to be perfect for you and the baby. You should be relaxing and enjoying the pampering instead of worrying about details that we can handle much better." The guest list Patricia had compiled without my input included her entire social circle from the country club, Jake's extended family members I'd met only briefly at our wedding, and business associates from Henderson Family Plumbing who had no personal relationship with me whatsoever. Conspicuously absent were my closest friends from Bloom and Petal, my college roommates who'd remained dear to me over the years, and several family members from my side who lived within driving distance of Phoenix. When I requested that my best friend Monica be added to the guest list, Patricia frowned and explained that the venue had limited capacity and the current list already stretched their maximum allowance. However, when I suggested reducing the number of her country club acquaintances to make room for people who actually mattered to me, she became defensive about the importance of maintaining social connections that would benefit Lily's future within Phoenix's elite circles. "You have to think bigger picture, Sarah," Patricia lectured while reviewing seating arrangements that placed me at a table with women I'd never met, rather than surrounded by people who genuinely cared about my well-being. "These aren't just random people. These are influential families whose children will grow up alongside Lily in the best schools and social organizations Phoenix has to offer. Building these relationships now creates opportunities for your daughter's entire future." The shower itself became a performance where I was expected to graciously accept gifts I hadn't registered for, express enthusiasm for a theme that reflected Patricia's taste rather than my preferences, and engage in conversations with strangers who knew more about Henderson family business than they did about my personality or interests. Patricia had chosen a, quote, classic elegance theme featuring white and gold decorations that looked beautiful, but felt completely disconnected from my actual aesthetic preferences, or the cozy, nature-inspired nursery Jake and I had lovingly created together. The gift opening ceremony turned into a public evaluation of my gratitude and social skills, as Patricia provided commentary on each present, while I struggled to maintain appropriate enthusiasm for items that contradicted my carefully researched baby preparation choices. When I opened expensive designer clothes in sizes that wouldn't fit a newborn, Patricia would explain their quality and investment value to the assembled crowd rather than allowing me to express my own thoughts about the gifts. "This little dress is from Nordstrom's premium baby collection," she announced while holding up a formal outfit that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. "Perfect for special occasions and photography sessions. Sarah, you'll want to save this for Lily's first Christmas portraits. The quality means it will photograph beautifully and last through multiple wearings." Her constant narration transformed what should have been personal moments of excitement about upcoming motherhood into educational presentations about proper appreciation for expensive gifts and social obligations. When guests asked me direct questions about my pregnancy experience, birth plans, or nursery preparations, Patricia would often answer for me or redirect conversations toward topics she deemed more appropriate for public discussion. The most mortifying moment came when Patricia presented me with her own special gift in front of the entire assembled crowd. She'd commissioned a professional photographer to create a maternity portrait session gift certificate, but instead of consulting me about preferences, she'd already scheduled the appointment and chosen the styling themes based on what she felt would best represent Henderson family values and aesthetics. "I've arranged for Phoenix's most exclusive maternity photographer to capture this special time," Patricia announced, while presenting the elaborate gift package, with obvious pride in her thoughtfulness and generosity. "The session is scheduled for next week, and I've already discussed wardrobe and location options with the photographer. We'll have beautiful portraits to display in the nursery and throughout the house, documenting this precious time properly." The assumption that she could schedule intimate photography sessions without my consent and choose artistic directions for permanent portraits of my body during pregnancy felt like the ultimate violation of personal autonomy. When I tried to express concerns about the timing and approach, suggesting that perhaps I should have input on something so personal and permanent, Patricia framed my hesitation as ingratitude for such an expensive and thoughtful gesture. "Maternity portraits are investment pieces that become family heirlooms," she explained to the watching crowd, making my discomfort part of the public entertainment. "Professional photography captures the beauty of pregnancy in ways that amateur pictures never can. Years from now, Lily will treasure having artistic documentation of her mother's pregnancy, and the family will have sophisticated portraits worthy of display in our formal spaces." The shower continued with games and activities that Patricia had selected based on her idea of sophisticated entertainment, rather than anything that reflected my personality or relationships with the assembled guests. Instead of the casual, intimate celebration I'd imagined, with close friends sharing advice and laughter, I found myself participating in formal activities designed to showcase Henderson family refinement and social standing. When one of Patricia's country club friends suggested a game where guests would guess details about my pregnancy experience and preferences, I realized how completely I'd been excluded from my own celebration planning. The questions revealed that Patricia had provided information about my due date, preferred names, and nursery themes without consulting me, sometimes giving answers that didn't even match my actual choices or feelings. "I heard you're planning to return to work just 6 weeks after delivery," one woman mentioned during the guessing game portion of the afternoon. "That seems so ambitious for a new mother. Patricia mentioned you run some kind of flower business, but surely family priorities will change once the baby arrives." The comment revealed that Patricia had been discussing my professional future with strangers, presenting my career decisions as tentative plans rather than firm commitments. The conversation that followed involved a group of women I'd never met offering unsolicited advice about balancing motherhood with career ambitions, all of them echoing Patricia's talking points about the impossibility of maintaining professional independence while properly caring for a newborn. Their collective wisdom emphasized the importance of prioritizing family needs over personal ambitions, making my desire to continue running Bloom and Petal seem selfish and unrealistic. As the afternoon progressed, I felt increasingly like a prop in Patricia's social performance rather than the guest of honor at my own baby shower. Every aspect of the celebration reflected her vision of what a Henderson family baby shower should look like, rather than anything that celebrated my journey into motherhood or honored the relationships that actually supported me through pregnancy. The final humiliation came during the closing toast when Patricia stood up to address the assembled crowd about the joy of welcoming me into the Henderson family and watching me grow into my role as wife and mother. Her speech emphasized my transition from independent business owner to devoted family member, presenting my pregnancy as the catalyst for positive changes that would benefit everyone involved in our expanding family circle. Sarah has learned so much about what really matters during these months of preparation, Patricia concluded while raising her champagne glass in my direction. We're all excited to see her embrace the beautiful role of Henderson family matriarch as she focuses on the priorities that will truly fulfill her. Motherhood changes everything, and we know Lily will be blessed to have a mother who understands the importance of family above all else. The applause that followed felt like a funeral for my independent identity rather than a celebration of impending motherhood. As I sat surrounded by strangers who'd been told stories about my transformation into a proper Henderson wife, I realized that this baby shower was actually a public announcement of my surrender to family expectations and social obligations that I'd never agreed to accept. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.